Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about hiring, specifically how to move beyond just a gut feeling and into a world where science can help us predict who's not just a good candidate, but truly the right one for the job. Let's get into it. So let's start with a question that, probably keeps a lot of managers up at night. Because we have all been there. You hire someone who just seems perfect on paper. They absolutely crush the interview, and then it just doesn't pan out. But the real cost, it goes way beyond just one person's salary.
I mean, just think about it for a second. The lost productivity, right? The hit to your team's morale, the time you have to spend hiring all over again, and of course, the sheer drama of it all. It adds up, and it becomes this massive drain on your company's money, its resources, and its energy. The stakes, they're incredibly high.
For decades, hiring has really felt more like a high-stakes game of chance than a business process. We've been leaning on these traditional tools, but as we're about to see, those tools have some pretty serious flaws.
Let's look at our two usual suspects. First, resumes. I mean, come on, a resume is basically a candidate's personal highlight reel, right? It's polished and perfected to hide any weaknesses. Then you've got interviews. And here our own biases, conscious or not, can totally cloud our judgment, making them way less reliable than a more objective, standardized test.
So when we lean only on these methods, what are we really doing? We're guessing. We are literally betting the future of our team on very incomplete information. But what if we could swap out that guesswork for some actual data-driven prediction? And that right there, that brings us to the very heart of this explainer. See, there's a framework for making these incredibly accurate hiring decisions, and it's built on three really solid pillars.
So here they are, the three pillars of predictive hiring: personality, competency, and attitude. You can think of each one as a different piece of a puzzle, and it's only when we see how they all fit together that we can really start to predict long-term success on the job.
And you absolutely need all three. Trying to measure just one or two, well, it's kind of like trying to build a stool with only two legs. It's just not going to work. You could have a candidate with a great personality, but a terrible attitude, or amazing skills, but they're just a poor fit for the team. You need all three, working together to get a clear, predictive picture.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into each pillar. We're going to break down what each one actually measures and why it's so important.
All right, first up is personality. Now, this is not about finding a quote-unquote good personality. It's all about alignment. Does the candidate's natural way of doing things actually match what the job requires every day? So, for instance, if a job needs someone to make cold calls all day, hiring a person who finds that stuff draining, you're basically setting them up to fail, no matter how skilled they are.
So these assessments often break personality down into these four quadrants.
You've got your analyzers, who just love details and logic. You have controllers, who are your natural-born leaders. Then there are supporters driven by empathy, and expressives who really thrive on social interaction. The whole goal here is to match a candidate's strongest quadrant to what the role really demands.
Pillar number 2 is competency. Now, this is what we usually focus on, right? Does the person have the raw skills, the aptitude, the experience to actually do the job? This covers everything from technical know-how to critical thinking, and really it's the foundation that allows personality and attitude to even matter.
And that brings us to our last pillar, which might just be the most important one of all: attitude. This isn't about skills or personality fit. This is about one simple thing. Is this person going to be a productive, manageable team player or a destructive one? And the source material for this has an absolutely perfect analogy for this.
I mean, how brilliant is that? It just illustrates the point perfectly. A candidate can have all the competence in the world. That's the big, powerful main rotor. But if their attitude is off, if that little tail rotor at the back can't keep things steady, the whole thing becomes useless. Or even worse, it becomes destructive to the entire team. So, objective assessments are really designed to flag these 5 key negative traits. A candidate who constantly blames others, is overly critical, maybe a bit dishonest, always negative, or just isn't supportive of the team's goals, well, that person can poison a workplace no matter how good they are at their job. Let's just take a quick look at blame, for example.
So imagine this. You ask a candidate a really simple question. It's a great opportunity for them to just take a little responsibility. But for someone who has a high blame trait, their answer tells you a whole lot more.
You've heard this before, right? The problem is always somewhere else. Of course, traffic is real, but a person who takes responsibility might say something like, I should have left earlier to account for the traffic. The person who defaults to blame, it's never their fault.
And that is the real power of this scientific approach. It helps you cut through all the noise of a typical interview. It helps you separate a legitimate reason from what's actually a pattern of making excuses, and that reveals the candidate's true underlying attitude.
So how do we know all this stuff isn't just some nice-sounding theory? Well, because this whole system is backed by decades of really rigorous, solid scientific research.
How about a 90% accuracy rate? That's what we're talking about. When all the different predictive markers in an assessment line up, they can predict a candidate's on-the-job attitude and competency with about 90% accuracy. That is a huge leap from the old way of just guessing. And this isn't just a small sample size. This system was validated using the absolute gold standard of research, the double-blind method. It's built on data from more than 62,500 people, where their assessment results were actually compared against their real-world job performance reviews from their managers.
So these assessments are built on 3 pillars of scientific validity, which is crucial. First, content validity. Are the questions even relevant? Second, construct validity. Does the test actually measure what it says it's measuring? And maybe most importantly, criterion validity. Do the test results actually predict how well someone will do their job? For these tools, the answer is yes, which makes the whole process effective, solid, and legally defensible.
So, let's just reframe this whole conversation for a second. Some people might look at testing and see it as an extra cost, but the real hidden cost is in not testing. It's the cost of all that drama, the lost productivity, and the constant cycle of bad hires. The real cost is gambling on the single most important asset any company has. It's people. You really can move from guesswork to greatness with every single person you hire. The science is there. So the only real question left is, are you ready to use it?